So what is a sub-procedure? It's a set of code that you call upon at any time to execute. It's like a command, a list of instructions. You can create sub-procedures in one of two ways. Either you can record, as we've seen already, to create a macro, therefore creates your sub-procedure, or you can manually create your own sub-procedures. So if we take a blank Excel file and open up the VBA editor, because this is a brand new workbook, it has no modules. So the first step is always to insert a new module. So that's insert module, which gives us our code sheet for module 1. Now a sub-procedure is always laid out syntactically the same way. It starts with a sub, then has to have a name, with an open and close brackets with nothing in. They could have things in, we could pass parameters to our sub-procedure, but for the moment it's just going to be sub-sample. You'll notice then that the editor places the end sub in for us, because that will be the end of the commands. And then everything between sub and end sub is your sub-procedure. So we could simply do a straightforward message box, which is a nice, easy function, MSG box. Now this is a standard statement that we can use within a routine, and we will look at in much more detail because it comes in two formats. Things to bear in mind when naming your sub-procedure, so the actual name you give it, can have numbers and letters, but the first character cannot be a letter. It makes no distinction between upper and lower case, so the sub-procedure is not case sensitive. The maximum number of characters is 255, which is a very long name for a sub-procedure anyway, but that is your fixed maximum. And most, but not all, punctuation characters are not allowed. So the safest thing is not to use any. You'll find you can use hyphen and underscore, but your at, your percentage, your dollar, your multiply symbol, your exclamation mark are not allowed. So it's 255 characters max, a mix of letters and numbers. The first character cannot be a number, definitely no spaces, and pretty much most other punctuation characters other than letters and numbers cannot be used. So that's just a small point there on naming your sub-procedures. Having created your sub-procedure, we then need to call that sub-procedure. Well, what you'll find is if you go back to Excel, is if you look at your macro list, there's your little sub-procedure listed in the macros sample, and we can run that directly from here as we would any other macro. And you can see our message box appears, the end of the world is nigh. So it's listed as a macro at the Excel side, and we can just run it as we see fit. And we'll be looking at other triggers that we can use to trigger sub-procedures other than going to the macro list and picking it, because that's not always the best way. So that's a sub-procedure. Into your editor, make sure you've got at least one module. In our case, that's module 1. We can always insert module 2 and add the code into there. It starts with a sub, then the name, and open and close brackets with nothing in for the moment, although we will look at passing parameters into your sub-procedures. Make sure it ends with end sub, and then all of your commands appear between sub and end sub. And hey presto, you've created your first manual, not recorded, sub-procedure.